Hello, my name is Cece Garrett, and I'm a clinical social worker and a health and wellness coach, specializing in stress management and problematic relationships for those who have families impacted by hoarding or hoarding behaviors themselves. I'm so happy to be here today and that you're here so that I can tell you a little bit more about what Dr. Eric Gentry has coined tools for hope. There's 3 topics within this conversation that I'd like to share with you. We're going to talk about stress, its negative effects, and then I'll walk you through an abbreviated owner's manual of your autonomic nervous system. Finally, after that, I'll talk about self-regulation, why it's important to learn skills for self-regulation, and then finally, I'll introduce several acute relaxations exercises that can be done quickly in 3 to 5 seconds, which, with the knowledge, that user's manual, become your tools for hope. Before we get started though, I'm going to have a few exercises and I'm guessing you're going to want to grab a pen and a pencil to take some notes. So go ahead, take just a second, go grab a pen, pencil, something to write on. I'll be right here. Okay, I hope you did it. I hope you grabbed something to write with because I want to jump right in. So I'm going to ask you kind of this provocative question. Do you have any stress in your life? I know, you're like, duh, right? Or maybe you're more cynical and you're thinking, yeah, of course I do. If we were in the same room, I would ask you just to tell me and I would write it down. What are the things that are causing stress in your life? You know, things like work, finances, maybe you've got kids, a spouse, a partner. Maybe it's politics, maybe it's traffic. There's so many things that might be causing you to feel stress. And so I'd have you write them down. So go ahead, although we're not in the same room, take a moment, list them out. I'll hang tight for a few. Okay, pause it if you need more time. Okay, so now that you've got this list of these things that are causing stress in your life, I'm going to ask you to take a moment and think about what are those things causing? What does that stress look like for you? So those might be mental things, emotional, physical, spiritual effects. These are the things that you wish you weren't experiencing. Sometimes we call them symptoms. So go ahead and take a moment. Again, if you need to pause, feel free to pause. I'll be right here. And then when you come back, let's talk about this a little bit more. Okay, did you do it? Did you write down the things? So now you've got a list, I'm hoping, of these things that are causing stress in your life and these really kind of negative symptoms or things that are happening because of them. And if I ask you now to look back at the causes of these symptoms, the stress that you're feeling, I'm wondering which of those things you can actually stop and control. And I don't know about you, but when I make my list, a lot of those things are things that I have very little, if any, control over. And that feels very disempowering. It feels kind of hopeless, which is why tools for hope is so important. So I'm going to ask you to stick with me for a moment, and I'm actually going to challenge that what you think is causing the symptoms that you're experiencing, so all of those things you listed as causes, go ahead and scratch them out. Because I'm going to posit that those actually aren't the things causing your stress. And as long as you believe they are, you're actually in a doomed cycle of having these negative feelings of stress, worry, trouble sleeping, high blood pressure, overeating or undereating, all of these things. So bear with me as I walk you through why, in fact, I don't believe that those causes you listed are actually the things causing your stress, and how, with a little education, you can actually take some control and move forward. But first, I want you to pause, and I'm going to ask you this question. Right now, take a scan around you. Look around in your environment and tell me, are you 100% safe right now? If we were together and I asked you this question, I'm a clinician, I work with people all the time, and I'm going to guess that you would probably tell me, no, nope, I'm not safe right now. And then I would ask you, okay, cool, tell me what is causing you to be unsafe right now. I love using this because this is a real world example that's very applicable, and you can kind of see it over here in the side. I'm sitting next to a bookshelf, and I've actually, ironically enough, had a bookshelf fall onto me, laden with books, and fortunately didn't massively injure me, but left me pretty uncomfortable. Had some bruises, definitely some soreness. So it'd be really easy for me to say right now, I'm not safe. There's a bookshelf. It could fall at any time. And that's true. It could. But right now, in this moment, as I push it, it moves, but it doesn't fall. I am 100% safe right now. Despite health risks, besides and despite financial things, gosh, watch the news. There's lots of things to be concerned about. But in this moment, we have the ability to know and to come into this ability to recognize that, in fact, right now, I am. And my guess is if you're still watching, you are 100% safe. But before I come to that, let's equip you with a little bit more knowledge. So I said that the first part I was going to teach you is kind of a user's guide to your autonomic nervous system. And, I'm going to be honest, I have a master's degree in clinical social work. I have a bachelor's in psychology. And I took neuroanatomy. I took a neurology class. And yet I didn't have an adequate user's manual, a way to understand how my mind and nervous system work to help me recognize perceived threat, those risks, and how being aware of them and driven by them keep me from recognizing my safety in the moment. So we're going to take kind of a 10,000 foot view of this. We're not going to go very deep into these explanations. If you really want more information on the neurology and neurophysiology of the autonomic nervous system, Dr. Eric Gentry has an amazing Tools for Hope video, quite a bit longer than this, that you can find on YouTube. And I encourage you, if you are that person and you like more information, go do it. Go check it out. I'm going to give you enough information that you'll be able to understand your autonomic nervous system and make it work for you instead of against you. But he definitely goes into way more detail and explanation than I'm equipped to do for you. So first of all, let's talk about that threat perception, that perceived threat, past painful learning. Something happened in the past that your brain has paired as being a threat, right? So there are two parts of this threat system: neuroception, which is within the brain, and is really that ability to detect safety. So the ability to go, I'm actually safe right now, when you're in a comfortable, relaxed body and you're in parasympathetic nervous system domination. Unfortunately, and most of us know this, there's these two parts. Parasympathetic, rest, digest, prefrontal cortex, frontal lobe. This is where rational thought, language, planning, memory occurs. And then there's the autonomic nervous system, which is brainstem, limbic system, which is our reptilian brain. It's really good at protecting us, fight or flight, making sure when we are at risk that we can get away or fight and stay alive, which was what it was designed to do when there were lions and tigers and bears roaming the world, when there were dinosaurs. But when the greatest threat most of us experience is somebody who didn't like our picture on Instagram, or our spouse who says something critical because dinner didn't quite fit what they hoped for, that system gets dysregulated frequently, and we get stuck working in hypervigilance, sympathetic, fight or flight, more than it was designed to, and that's where things start to go offline for us. So perceived threat. What is perceived threat? Well, there's a lot of things that happen in the body and the brain when we perceive a threat. And again, those perceived threats, I'm sitting next to this bookshelf. I could perceive it as a threat and experience a whole host of physical and mental symptoms. In perceived threat, if you're afraid of dogs, you see a dog and it starts barking, you might notice your heart rate going up. Your breath rate, you're going to breathe more frequently and shallow. Your breath volume goes down because of that shallow breathing. And you're also going to notice this influx of adrenaline and cortisol, which are these hormones that help prepare the body for strength and action. Muscle tension goes up in this response to perceived threat. Energy goes up. So does disease if we aren't dealing with it quickly and appropriately. So physiologically, our body is ready to go, but brain mechanics are starting to shift. So those two systems I was talking about, the parasympathetic, rest and digest, and the sympathetic, fight or flight, don't play well together. They're kind of a teeter-totter, if you will. So when one's up, the other's down, and vice versa. They don't really exist in a middle ground. One's in domination or the other. And what happens is when we perceive threat, that sympathetic fight or flight goes into action. That threat response is activated and our ability to defend ourselves is heightened. But the parts of our brain that are executive functioning, that prefrontal cortex, all of those things, judgment, language, planning, concentration, coordination. Have you ever been scared and tried to run and feel like you're going to fall over? Language skills. We have a hard time coming up with words when we're activated into that fight or flight system. Our sense of well-being goes down because we feel afraid. Other effects, especially when we're in that threat center domination, that sympathetic nervous system domination for prolonged periods, then we get into obsessional thinking. Thoughts pop up that seem to tell us that we are not good enough, that we can't take care of things. And that drives us into compulsive behaviors. It also is where symptom generation occurs. So feelings of anxiety, chronic fatigue, mental unwellness, as well as physical pain even. And what happens there is we start to feel really tired. We start to shut down over time because there's so much energy going into that prep for the fight or flight. Even though it's perceived threat, we're 100% safe. And that ends up leading us to a place where our ability to be intentional, to do the things that are consistent with who we want to be, those things go tank. No ability when the prefrontal cortex is offline to actually choose the behavior that we believe we want to do And then after the fact, we come back, ugh, I can't believe I did it again. Am I ever going to be able to change? Yes, but not without some skills, some new tools. And that's what we're going to start here today. Other things that may be happening if you're in this perceived threat, hyperarousal, over-adaptation, you're constantly in a state of panic and alert, looking for the next threat. And let's be clear, I don't know what you grew up in. I don't know what experiences you've had. They may make a ton of sense that you need to prepare and to look for threat before it comes. I certainly know in my childhood home, it felt like the only way to survive was to be always aware, anticipating what was coming next. Of course, I didn't understand. I only learned it within the last year what that hypervigilance was doing. Turning off the digestive system, increasing gastro distress. Like, of course, when it's not working, when you put stuff in it, it's not really happy. And so we've got this energy, we've got all of these things that we want, this executive functioning offline, obsessional thinking coming to keep us safe, which drives compulsive behaviors, things that we're not really proud of, and takes out our ability to be the people we believe we are when we're not stressed out. And yet most of us are still feeling stressed out. So again, just coming back here, looking at this idea that perceived threat, these trauma experiences, little t, big T experiences, create this energy and stress reactivity. So again, when we perceive the threat, our brain, that sympathetic nervous system, feels sorry for us and goes to protect us. It takes the energy into our body, constricts muscles, makes us bigger, but it's also knocking out that frontal lobe where we can actually make conscious choice consistent with who we want to be. And as that energy goes up, the neocortical function goes down, and really we find ourselves then in this compulsive behavior or response, either being really big, yelling, maybe being physically aggressive, or avoiding. We walk away, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen, and so we walk away. And what ends up happening is a little bit later, we come back to this moment and we're so disappointed, this breach of integrity. And that's the moral wound, as Dr. Gentry calls it, that these things that happen to us, this past painful learning, continues with us in that perceived risk. And when we're in that hypervigilant state, we no longer are in the driver's seat. And so we do things, compulsive action, aggression, avoidant behavior, that then leads us feeling like we weren't how we wanted to be. So again, looking back here, past painful learning comes in, brain triggers it, perceived threat, woo, 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 gotta do something. Sympathetic nervous system dominates, and we're prepared only to fight or run. We're not able to have that higher level evolved brain functioning where we can have this elaborate access to our language, our ability to form intimate relationships with friends and loved ones. And we get really kind of worked up, and we're exhausted, and often we spend a lot of time disliking how we've responded. So it's really interesting. Stress really is, in fact, just the perception of threat. So when you look here at these scans, you notice that the increased basal ganglia activity and high anxiety, and that high anxiety is the brain taking that past painful learning. It's created an if X, then Y, and that trigger event has told your brain something bad's happening. But that's not always the case. Sometimes we hear that person say our name, and it doesn't involve a threat in the next sentence. And we have to then be able to come back into a comfortable body, which is interoception, so that we can move forward and learn how to get back into that parasympathetic dominance, executive functioning in the frontal lobe. So I've talked a little bit about the autonomic nervous system, those two parts. So you've got that rest and digest, prefrontal cortex, parasympathetic nervous system. You've got its antagonist part, which is very helpful, that sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight. And again, these are basic terms, basic explanations. There are much more elaborate conversations to be had about this. But so we have these two pieces, and that they are not designed to be activated equally at the same time. One's going to be up and the other down. When we want to be actively choosing how we respond, we need to be in parasympathetic dominance. We need to have rest, digest, executive functioning. But if we've perceived threat, our brain has turned our bodies into high energy, taking in energy, tightening up, and we get dysregulated. And it's not really our fault if we don't know how to use it, right? So that's where we are. So today I want to talk about in greater depth what self-regulation is. So this is, again, very simplistic, and I'm going to come back to this over and over. Self-regulation is relaxation, but relaxation is not necessarily self-regulation. So if we were here in a conversation instead of this kind of stilted, disconnected video presentation, I'd ask you, what do you do for relaxation? And I can just share with you some of the things that clients have shared with me that they like to do. I have a client who is a runner and likes to go for runs, avid runner, runs like crazy stuff, like a marathon's not long enough, apparently. Who knew? I have clients who like to game. I have clients who go and have massage. I kind of like going and having a professional massage. It's a great way to relax, right? But I guess the question I would have for you and the challenge is, when your husband walks through the door at 5:15 and wants to know what's for dinner, I'm starving right now, how is committing to a 45-minute run or scheduling a 2-hour massage helpful in the moment? Those things are great things, and they should be part of a healthy, balanced life. But what we need in that moment where perceived threat has come online is something that we can actually do much more quickly. So self-regulation is just that ability in the moment to interrupt the threat, to interrupt the body's response to threat, that perceived threat, and then to allow the autonomic nervous system, by recognizing a relaxed, comfortable body, to come back into parasympathetic dominance and allow us to remain fully engaged in the things that we need to do. Cooking dinner, talking to clients, driving, kind of important to remain in control. And maybe there's something else for you. The one thing that's really helpful about self-regulation is acute relaxation, which we'll talk about more. Immediately produces a sense of comfort and well-being within the body, and the brain-body connection means that once the body is relaxed, the mind goes, oh, it must be okay. And then we can get back into this sense of comfort and well-being. I'm actually going to tell you, as I'm presenting right now, I'm actually noticing, that I'm having some perceived threat. And so I'm just going to take a moment, though I haven't taught you any of the skills, to just, in this moment, it's going to take just a couple of seconds. I can do it while I talk to you. And I'm just going to come into my body, be aware, relax some muscle tension, and then we're going to move on. Now that we've relaxed the body, we've told the brain through the relaxed body that in fact there's no perceived threat, we get that prefrontal cortex executive functioning back online, which gives us the ability to reason, to rationalize, to talk and feel without losing control. Intentional thought and language, that's what we want so that we can choose our responses instead of reacting. And of course, this is where health, the opposite of distress, is made in this repeated practice of coming into the body, recognizing perceived threat through that muscle tension and discomfort, relaxing and releasing it, quick 3 to 5 second touches throughout the day, getting us back out of the threat system into the frontal lobe, where we can choose how to respond, how to engage, and to find ourselves living more fully the way we want to and being the people we want to be. And of course, once we're in that prefrontal cortex, we have the ability to stop being reactive and instead to be actors, choosing what we're going to say and do. And I don't know about you, I much prefer knowing that I have the ability to choose, even in a situation that feels distressing, uncomfortable, with the awareness that I'm actually safe and being able to go, you know what? It's okay for me to be angry in this moment, but I can respond in a way that means I share with somebody how I'm feeling and what's happening, and then can actually invite a conversation, a give and take to work towards resolution of what's causing the discomfort. So self-regulation is this combination then of neuroception, top down, so in the brain, am I 100% safe right now? And interoception, which is body up, where I'm checking with my body, because when I get too far into it, I'm not going to be able to have rational thought. But doing these quick checks of my body, am I tense? And then being aware of those changes as they happen, and then coming into the moment throughout the day, not always when I'm having a trigger, but sometimes just because I'm sitting here and have a moment and going, I'm really good at perceiving threat where there's none. What's my body doing? Oh, I can relax that, which then allows me to get back into prefrontal cortex, neuroception. Am I actually safe? I am. I'm 100% safe. I can feel discomfort and still recognize I'm safe and have access to planning, organization, language, the ability to have safe, intimate relationships and attachment. So talking about this, one of the things that I've been doing for years was this idea of do it anyway, do it scared. And it's actually something, and I'm just going to be really clear, it's distressing, but it's everywhere in culture. Do it anyways, just do it, right? Nike, just do it. And there's a lot of this in the media. Social media is rife with people pushing people to do things even when they're scared. And you know what? There is something to be said for recognizing that the ability to survive, resiliency, and grit are important. But if we're doing it, believing that we can just keep doing it scared, what ends up happening is when we're scared all the time, and this is the Yerkes-Dodson curve here, and this is a really interesting curve. So you'll notice over here, I hope you can see this, on the right-hand side, we have eustress. And then over here on the, well, I'm sorry, I said that was the right-hand side, and I'm apparently not telling the difference. That's actually the left side. So let's go back a second. So across the x-axis down here is arousal stress. So that is, at this point, here at the vertex, that is us being asleep. So no energy. And then you see here on the y, performance. We're asleep, there's no energy exerted, there's no performance. We're just still, right? Obviously, there's something going on. But again, this is that 10,000-foot view. As our arousal stress increases, and again, remember, stress isn't always negative. This is what's interesting here, is that hump. So to the left, as we're going up, we have this eustress or positive stress. So the need and the energy actually causes performance, and we get into this comfort zone. I have a client who's a runner who's taught me about getting into the pain cave, which is getting beyond the comfort zone, pushing harder, going faster. So that's probably right here, just to the left of that hump. And once you get there, it's uncomfortable, but you're still in optimal functioning. So when we're on that eustress side of the hump, where fatigue starts to set in, where the energy exerted is at a point where we can still perform, we're going to see our best selves, no symptoms. But once we get over that hump, now we're starting to come back down. What do you notice here? Performance is dropping off. The stress is increasing. And as it increases beyond that hump, our ability to start to continue to go drops dramatically. And the further beyond that we go, the more we get into exhaustion, ill health, and breakdown. So it's an interesting phenomenon. We see it in running, but it's more interesting when we're talking about emotional, because we don't often think about the energy involved in thought and emotionality. And when we're in that hyperarousal, we're using that arousal stress all the time. And at some point, we get beyond the hump, we hit the crash point, our red dot, and now we're determined to crash. And so the reality is we need to be able to come back into a comfort zone, a comfortable body, and stay to this side to reduce the incidence of those negative symptoms of stress and to increase our performance without hitting that crash. So again, interoception, neuroception, these things go together. And I love what Dr. Bessel van der Kolk says about it. Past painful learning, all of it is about trauma, whether that's big T trauma, these events that we recognize clinically, the idea that you're watching someone get shot, or maybe you've been shot, this perception that you're no longer going to be alive. This might be the end of me. Or little T trauma, where just you feel unsafe repeatedly sometimes. Bessel is amazing, and you may know his name. He's the author of the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And really, that's what interoception is about. It's about the body's register of what's happening in the mind, that connection mind-body. And Bessel says, you want to know what heals trauma? It's not a bunch of going back and talking about those old past painful things. It's actually interoception. Recognizing the body when it starts to come offline, acute relaxation in the moment, from a relaxed body, watching the mind move out of the threat dominance cycle, back into prefrontal cortex, parasympathetic dominance, and being able to go, this feels uncomfortable, but I'm 100% safe. And now I get to choose how I'm going to respond. So again, interoception is a present felt sense in the moment of the body's physiological processes. And you may, at the beginning, interoception is noticing even that you're feeling tense. You have those muscles in your shoulders, maybe in your arms and legs. Maybe you've got a clenched buttocks. I'm not going to say if I do or not, but I often do. And just becoming aware of them. That's the first part of interoception. And then becoming sensitive to that feedback, recognizing, okay, my body's starting to tell me that past painful learning is starting to get me off balance. My threat center is starting to get activated. And if I continue here, it's not going to end well. And that's not where I want to be. So by doing that, recognizing that potential to get dysregulated and then preventing that by being aware, relaxing the body, and then being able to come back up to the brain. So bottom up interoception, and then being able to come back to the frontal lobe where we can make a decision and become and respond the way we want to. So it's kind of hard to see here with the colors, but I hope you see this. Interoception, so that recognition of those early warning symptoms in your body, the stress and tension, and acute relaxation, which I'm going to teach you soon, I promise, over 100 times a day. At the outset, 3 to 5 times a day is going to make a difference in your life. And if you're doing that, you're going to drop your stress level dramatically, and other symptoms are going to start to fade. But what good would it be if we didn't talk about this? So I'm afraid of you. I mean, let's be clear. I don't know in this video, when you watch it, I don't actually know what your response is going to be. That's okay. But I can recognize right now that perceived threat in a comfortable body and recognize I'm not in any danger. I'm 100% safe right now. So neuroception with interoception, those acute relaxation exercises, is the basis of self-regulation. So it's this idea of Netflix and chill minus Netflix. Developing not mindfulness in the way that many of us have learned mindfulness, but bodyfulness, being aware of our body, and then over time, coming into a comfortable body and being able to recognize triggers and in a comfortable body, moving through them and choosing the response we want, that intentional living that we want. So what good would this be if I didn't actually teach you some of those acute relaxation skills that are so essential to interoception, neuroception, self-regulation? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach you 6, and I teach them in a slightly different order than some people do. I kind of start at the top and move down because that's how I can remember it. So again, we're going to learn body scan or wet noodle. I'm also going to teach you peripheral vision or the drift, soft palate relaxation, diaphragmatic body full belly breathing, joint decompression, and finally pelvic floor relaxation. And I'm teaching you all of these because it's not a one size fits all. Some of you are going to like some of you are going to like others, and you just got to work through it. Here's what Dr. Gentry says, and I love this, and I think it's amazing as a person-centered treatment provider. It doesn't matter which one works for you, as long as you know which one works for you and you have the behavior habit and practice of using it. So again, I'm going to present 6 of these, and I hope by the time we're done, these become kind of comfortable. And this is where you may want your pen out to take some notes, although I do also encourage you to do the exercises with me. So body scan / wet noodle. And that wet noodle is a little bit, it's not a wet noodle, it's a relaxed noodle versus the hard spaghetti you take out of the box and you just hold it and it's rigid, right? So to do this exercise, the first thing we do is we just take a quick minute, and not even a minute, let's say seconds. We just kind of notice. And so I'm going to do this as I'm talking to you. And I'm just going to tell you, a lot of times I encourage people as we're teaching this face-to-face in an actual session, I encourage you to start with your head and shoulders, because a lot of people in fight or flight, you start to tense up your shoulders, you start to have that trapezoid muscle, base of the skull, neck. You start to feel really kind of uncomfortable. And so I recommend starting there. Are you clenching your butt cheeks? Do you have tension in your legs or in your arms? And becoming aware of that. And then just sending a little bit of relaxation to those tense muscles. As I'm doing this, I'm noticing, as I often do, between my shoulder blades. And I often, in the past, would get so tight in those muscles, I would actually pop a rib and have to see a chiropractor. And this has actually saved me a huge amount of money on chiropractor visits, because now I'm aware and I'm not having to do that. So again, I'm just going to do a quick second to check in. Yep, definitely feeling some tension between my shoulder blades. And I'm just going to focus on relaxing those. And I'm done. Acute relaxation, body scan, wet noodle. Again, any muscle you noticed, you just relax it and you continue on. The next one, moving down, so I call that head down because that starts with the head, is peripheral vision. And I like to teach this one to guys, and especially teenage guys, because this is actually something that SWAT team members, SEAL members, elite forces are taught because of the tendency when we're hypervigilant, which is appropriate when you're a sharpshooter, to get tunnel vision, right? So this is kind of an interesting one. I'm looking at the camera, you're looking at me, but kind of maybe look away for a second. And you pick a point. I'm going to pick the little light next to my camera, and I'm going to focus in really intently on that, get it nice and crisp. And then I'm just going to kind of let my eyes soften, which means that that little dot's getting kind of fuzzy. It's more like a loose snowball than a tight ice ball, right? Now what I'm going to do, and I'm going to bring my hands really close to my face just so that you can see them in the mirror, but I'm actually going to intentionally bring them out to the side, my fingers, and challenge myself while I'm still looking at that little light with my soft gaze to also be aware of my fingers. So by doing this, I'm forcing myself out of that tunnel vision tendency, and the brain picks this up as a release of threat. We're no longer in tunnel vision, we're focusing on that. And this is the cool part. I can do this when I'm working with a client in the moment and they never know I'm doing it. I'm doing it right now as I'm talking to you. Just taking a moment to be aware as I'm looking ahead of what's in my peripheral vision. As you practice it the first couple of times, you might have to do the little finger thing, but over time you'll get to a point where you can do it. When you're driving, I love doing it when I'm on a road trip, just making sure, because I have a tendency to get tunnel vision, right? Driving down the freeway. So coming back again to peripheral vision. So that's number 2. We've done wet noodle, body scan, peripheral vision. And now we're going to move into soft palate. And I've got this nice little diagram, and I hope you can see it, of where the soft palate is. So in the roof of your mouth, there's a hard, bony area just below the tip of your nose. And then as you move your tongue back, just before you can stop touching it, the bone part goes away. And you'll kind of notice here where the bone piece kind of fades away. And then there's just this soft tissue. So that's your soft palate. And how this works is that you're going to just take a moment and relax your jaw. Relax your tongue. Don't need to push up on your roof of your mouth with your tongue. Just let it relax. And then you're going to think to yourself as though you were going to say, arg. We want that arg. That actually causes the soft palate to rise. And there's a vagal nerve, that polyvagal nerve runs throughout the body and runs behind the soft palate that's activated and triggers that relaxation sensation. Again, 3 to 5 seconds, you can do it. You know, you're not going to be able to talk while you do it, but you can do it almost anywhere, just sitting there. So again, now we've done 3. We've done the wet noodle body scan. We've done the peripheral vision drift. I've introduced you to soft palate relaxation for all of you who love the pirate erg. And now we're going to do diaphragmatic breathing. And I'm just going to caution you, because I bet some of you are like, Cece, I know this one. Everybody teaches this. But I teach it a little bit differently, because here's what we want. I do want you to slow your breathing, and that's usually what we do with diaphragmatic breathing. I do want you to deepen and open your rib cage, expanding it out. So you're doing that belly breathing. Absolutely. But what I really want you to do is to get out of the counting and into the body fullness. So as you do this, and I'm going to do it with you, I'm going to challenge you to imagine that the air you're breathing in through your nose, you're going to follow it like a little dotted line. And you're going to notice how it feels going through your nostrils. You're going to notice the temperature and the feel as it hits the back of your throat. You're going to notice the air as it expands into your rib cage and lungs. And then you're also going to really sit with it as you then Release it, let your ribs relax. Maybe noticing some warmth as your ribs contract, bringing the air back up your throat, hitting that soft palate, the uvula, and back out through your mouth, where it's warm in the back of your throat, but by the time it hits your mouth because of your tongue, it feels kind of cool. So again, we're going to do this. Really being aware of that sensation of the air as it comes in, your expansion of your ribs, feeling the air as it fills your lungs, and then relaxing that, letting it back up through your chest, out the back of your throat, and out your mouth. And if you do that slowly enough, you may have to do it 1 or 2 times. But you'll notice this, maybe a need to sigh or maybe even a yawn. You might even notice some salivation happening, especially if you were in activation before, because that rest and digest, that's once you start getting saliva, you're back into rest and digest. So now we've done 4 of the 6 that I was going to teach you. We've done body scan, wet noodle, right up here, starting in the head. We've done peripheral vision and drift. Soft palate, that erg silently. We've done that diaphragmatic body full belly breathing. And now we're going to go to joint decompression. And this is one I love because, well, I had actually an experience recently where I got the better part of a school bus of teenagers doing this, and we joked about it, but it's a great thing. So if you've ever been to a massage therapist, had a professional massage, you probably experienced where, they did a massage on your arm, and then at the end, they took your hand gently in both of their hands, just kind of tugged really gently. Well, that's joint decompression. Again, that polyvagal nerve runs throughout the body, and by expanding that space in the joints, so joint decompression, I don't know about you, I can't pull my own arm, but what I can do, you'll notice from the pictures, I'm just going to take my finger, I'm just going to gently tug on it. I'm not pulling hard enough to actually pop my knuckles. Although I know a lot of teenagers, when they do this, they really want to pop their knuckles, and that's cool, whatever. That's not for me to judge. But this joint decompression also triggers that relaxation sensation, which gets us out of that sympathetic nervous system domination, back into parasynth, rest, digest, executive functioning, where we really want and need to be. So we've done 5 of these now. Now we're going to go to what is probably my favorite, but also the one that requires the most practice. So hang with me on this, and if you have trouble, I encourage you to keep trying it because it's powerful once you get the hang of it. So it's called pelvic floor relaxation. And some of you have probably experienced this similar if you've ever done a Kegel. It's very similar, but we're using it in a different way. So I'm going to ask you to do something kind of awkward. Take your hands, and I want you to put them under your buttocks. I want you to notice and touch those bony protrusions. We also call them the sit bones. So we're going to notice them. We're not doing anything other than becoming aware of where they are. So, okay. Now I'm going to ask you to take your hands back out and come to the front and notice and touch the top of your hip bone in the front. So those points create this parallelogram. In women, it's more pronounced tilted forward, but even in men, it's tilted forward. And these are the bilateral anterior superior iliac spine and ischial tuberosities. That's a lot. Let's just say it's your sit bones and the front of your hips, right? So these are kind of these 4 borders we want to be aware of, have this muscle memory of. And so in this, like a Kegel, for me, the best way to do it is to tighten up that sensation down there, like I'm trying to stop urine flow. And then relaxing. Again, being aware of those 4 spots and moving towards expanding those 4 corners out. And the idea is not to keep doing the contraction part like you would with a Kegel. This is where this is very different. But after you've tightened it and relaxed it, pushing those 4 points out and just letting that muscle relax, being aware of if you've had your buttocks clenched, relaxing that. But that is going to potentially, when you get it mastered, trigger full body relaxation because of that polyvagal nerve running through your body. So these acute relaxation exercises, that taking a thermostat, temperature of your body and the tension, when it starts to become tense, utilizing one of these 6, body scan, wet noodle, then your peripheral vision, the soft palate, the body full belly breathing, joint decompression, or this pelvic muscle, the pelvic floor muscle relaxation, tells your body that you're comfortable, gets back into a comfortable body, which triggers your mind of there's no threat present and allows you to get back into that prefrontal cortex, parasympathetic domination, where you can have intentional choices when you have these triggers, when you have these stressful events, past painful learning, and you can choose a different response, feel in control without being too high in your muscle, and able to choose a life that is intentional the way you desire. So I would challenge you over the next couple of days, 3 to 5 times a day, 10 times, 25 times, check in with your body. Notice if you have any muscle tightness, discomfort, relax those muscles. Come back and ask yourself, am I 100% safe right now? And I hope for you in time, each of those glimmers of moments take you a step closer to the intentional life that you want to lead, and that with coaching, I know together we'll get you there. Thanks so much for sitting with me for this period. Thank you.